Chicago 2011 mayoral election. How did the candidates stack up on queer rights issues? Here with more on the story is political correspondent Hot Todd Capella. Todd?
Thanks, Brady. There are four major candidates remaining after the Illinois Supreme Court ruled that Rahm Emanuel can stay on the ballot. But who are these candidates and what are their stances on LGBTQ issues? VAL reporter Wallace Klondike sat down with political analyst Joe Erbentraut, who's been writing about the topic on ChicagoPride.com.
Who are the top candidates running for mayor?
Well, at this point, there's really four candidates that have emerged. You have Rahm Emanuel. He is the former White House chief of staff. He has cleared the residency issue recently, so he is on the ballot. Gary Chico, Carol Mosley Braun, and Miguel Del Valle. Those are the four that are really contending in this race.
Can you give us some background on these candidates?
You know, Rahm, he was the #2 guy to Obama in the White House, so that carries some positives of some people and some negatives. Some people are concerned we didn't get a transgender inclusive agenda. We also didn't get comprehensive immigration reform or the DREAM Act passed. But if you also look at his platform, Rahm has a great record with the HRC when he served in the U.S. Congress, and he also helped to get the grant for the Sound Health. Gary Chico, he was the first candidate to come out with an LGBT platform, and he has a long history of serving in this city, and he's a really strong candidate and a pretty strong advocate too. Carol Mosley Braun, she was U.S. Senator here in Illinois. She was the first African-American female senator, and according to her platform was the first senator to have a LGBT liaison in her campaign, and she has a pretty strong record on LGBT rights and other social issues as well. And finally, Miguel Del Valle, city clerk currently, and he has a nonprofit management background and a really strong campaign and platform on social issues.
What about their platforms on LGBTQ rights?
In this race, there's four strong candidates who all have really pro-LGBT records, and it's not often in this community we get to choose between four great candidates for an office as important as the mayor of Chicago. So I think that requires a level of analysis. Look at not only their platforms and their responses to the community questionnaire that's on Equality Illinois' website, look at their specific plans. Miguel Del Valle, for example, has a very detailed plan of addressing bullying issues in Chicago public schools. He actually wants to add an LGBT liaison to CPS, and that's a unique position that he has. Carol Mosley Braun, if you read her questionnaire, the responses aren't very detailed. In some areas lacks a certain understanding of how the city works. Her response about the police department seems to indicate she's not aware that there's an LGBT liaison already. Really, all four candidates are proposing solid things to address diversity issues in Chicago, and also in addressing discrimination happening in businesses that are contracting with the city. So I just think we need to keep a real close eye on these candidates.
Definitely, that's a great recommendation. And is there anything else that we should know?
Obviously, LGBT-specific issues in a city as large as Chicago are not the only issues that matter in the community. There's so many things happening in this city right now. There's a budget crisis, and a lot of programs are at risk of being cut. So not only do we need to look at what these candidates are saying now in their campaigns, we also have to be looking at their programs in a very detailed way. Once one of these candidates emerges as the mayor, we really need to hold their feet to the fire and say, these are the issues you campaigned on, and we need to make sure that those campaign promises turn into a reality. And I'm really confident actually in our city's queer communities that we are going to be taken seriously by whoever wins.
But how do community organizers feel about the upcoming mayoral election? We talked to some on the streets to get their viewpoints.
We expect the next mayor to take a strong stance for all concerns of the LGBT community, from marriage equality to school safety to transgender inclusion, and just to providing social services for the homeless and the hungry in our community as well.
I don't know, I think the first thing I'd like to see is just a mayoral candidate that knows who we are. Like, do they know what a transgender person is? Do they even know what the word queer means to us?
The more equitable distribution of resources for LGBT communities on the south and west side.
Our community is much more diverse than just Boys Town and there are a few blocks in Halstead.
The difference in terms of the amount of resources is huge.
The queer community is everywhere throughout Chicagoland.
So we definitely want to see equitable distribution as well as a sensitivity to the growing tragedy, if you will, of STDs and STIs, infections in communities of color, and a recognition that women and lesbians in particular do contract STDs and HIV/AIDS.
Join the Impact Chicago supports a mayor advocating full legal and social equality for all lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, and queer people in Chicago. We need someone willing to engage activists in pursuing public policy for all.
If you don't do what we ask, you don't stay in office, right?
One of the most important ways that our community can keep the next mayor accountable is by our votes and our voices.
We probably have a couple 100,000 at least potential voters, and we need to let the mayor know that we will get out and we will vote and we will hold him or her accountable for keeping promises.
We're part of a coalition that helped pull together a questionnaire that asked key questions of the next mayor and their commitment to our community. So really holding the next person, the next candidate that's elected, accountable to those questionnaires and ensuring that they stand by the words that they wrote.
If you throw queers under the bus for political expedience, we will use our public spaces to hold nonviolent but highly visible protests and possibly embarrass you on YouTube.
And I don't think any mayor necessarily wants that, big, large protest outside of the steps of City Hall. So, I think it's just ensuring that they understand that we're watching.
So you have to pay attention, you have to stay aware, and you have to show up at those town hall meetings and those public hearings. You have to put your voice out there in the media and in other forms of communication and just not let up.
And that concludes our special news brief. We remind voters that an informed decision is the best decision. Remember to do your own research and vote February 22nd. Thank you for tuning in to this VAL News Brief.